Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're absolutely bypassing the cultural romanticism of the so-called grind. Instead, we're going to forensically analyze the cold, hard medical data. We're looking at the severe biological and neurological toll that hustle culture takes, specifically on Black professionals. We're tracking exactly how navigating social survival literally turns into cellular degradation.
To place you right at the flashpoint of this health crisis, let's start with this staggering statistic. Older African Americans are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop dementia than non-Hispanic whites. 2 to 4 times. This isn't just some minor statistical noise. It's a massive health disparity affecting millions. And researchers have been working relentlessly to figure out the exact mechanisms driving it.
Let's dive into some foundational research here from Dr. Arlene Geronimus. She notes that navigating predominantly white, high-stress environments leaves individuals with physical health metrics of someone a full 10 years older. This alarming 10-year biological age gap, it's not just a byproduct of working long hours. It's a direct, measurable result of the pathogenic tax of chronic code switching and high-effort coping strategies. Which brings us to Section 1, the anatomical cost of survival. So, let's break down the exact mechanics of this. To survive systemic friction, a lot of folks adopt something called John Henryism. Think of it as this intense, high-effort striving response to push back against negative stereotypes and adversity. But here's the catch. When researchers actually looked at older community-dwelling Black adults, they found this relentless coping is definitively linked to lower baseline cognitive function. We're talking specifically about hits to your somatic memory, working memory, and visual spatial abilities. And here's the really wild paradox. While active code switching and this prolonged striving might secure promotions or, yield higher professionalism scores at work, it simultaneously incurs an immediate, devastating cognitive debt. Dominant corporate cultures treat this as a professional asset, right? But make no mistake, the individual is footing the bill entirely with their own neurological reserves. That leads us right into Section 2, the executive function tax. We can actually quantify this cognitive penalty in real time. Clinical trials use the Stroop color word task, which is a highly validated measure of cognitive flexibility, and they proved that Black participants who were forced to code switch exhibited statistically significant reaction time delays immediately afterward. When you have to suppress your natural linguistic or behavioral tendencies, your brain literally has to exert deliberate inhibitory control to manage it. So the crucial takeaway here is that anticipating external stereotypes diverts your finite neural resources toward constant self-monitoring. This mentalizing overload operates like an unauthorized withdrawal directly from your brain's working memory. It reduces your ability to process information efficiently right when you need it the most.
Now, moving on to Section 3, weathering and allostatic load.
Because you see, this daily cognitive suppression doesn't just stay isolated in the brain. Dr. Geronimus' weathering hypothesis explains how the cumulative impact of social, economic, and racial adversity leads to early, systemic health deterioration. We measure this through something called allostatic load, which is basically the compounding wear and tear on your body from repeatedly adapting to stressors. The data clearly shows this physiological burden registers across your cardiovascular, metabolic, and immune systems way before any clinical disease is actually diagnosed.
It happens in a very precise, step-by-step biological cascade. First, navigating these race-conscious spaces is perceived by your brain as a threat. Second, that perception triggers the sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response. Third, you get hit with that executive function depletion we just talked about. And finally, over years, this constant upregulation forces prolonged systemic inflammation and actual cellular degradation. And we can literally watch this happening minute by minute. Researchers actually outfitted diverse college students with wearable EDA or electrodermal activity sensors. The data documented that incidences of interpersonal discrimination, vicarious racism, or even just rumination on these events caused immediate, measurable spikes in physiological stress arousal. It's essentially hijacking the sympathetic nervous system in real time. Which brings us to the core consequence in Section 4, accelerated brain aging.
Over decades, this constant stress physically alters the brain's anatomy. Some truly critical neuroimaging research from the Harvard Aging Brain Study investigated older African Americans who had elevated beta-amyloid, which is a key pathology in Alzheimer's. When they compared these individuals to their white counterparts who had the exact same elevated beta-amyloid levels, the structural disparities were just staggering.
The data revealed significantly decreased cortical thickness in primary Alzheimer's signature regions among the African American participants. We're talking about notable degradation in the brain's main memory and decision-making centers, places like the lateral parietal cortex, the superior frontal gyri, and notably smaller hippocampal volumes. The brain is quite literally losing its structural density.
Using advanced regression models, the researchers determined that this neurodegeneration, which is heavily driven by chronic cardiovascular stress and white matter damage, means the brains of these individuals have a biological brain age of up to 4 years older than their non-Hispanic white peers. So, the wear and tear is fundamentally aging the brain faster than the clock itself.
Let's pull this all together in Section 5, a pathogenic coping strategy.
What becomes undeniably clear when you look at all this data is that hustle culture and code switching aren't just exhausting. They are active drivers of disease. A strategy that was initially designed to navigate systemic bias, evade racial battle fatigue, and secure access to the middle class, paradoxically triggers the very biological decay that cuts those lives short. What functions as an economic survival strategy on paper acts simultaneously as a biological trigger for neurodegeneration.
This constant burden of proof required by the hidden curriculums of white-dominant corporate and academic spaces manifests physically every single day. It shows up as high resting blood pressure, elevated cortisol, increased C-reactive protein inflammation, severe clinical burnout, and even shortened DNA telomeres. And those telomeres are the stabilizing ends of our chromosomes that literally dictate cellular aging. I want to leave you with this provocative final thought to chew on. If the tools required for professional survival are actively accelerating our biological decay, how do we dismantle the environments that demand this tax in the first place? True equity absolutely requires changing the environments that demand chronic code switching and relentless hustle, rather than just endlessly celebrating the resilience of the bodies it ultimately destroys. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll see you next time.